Yeah, yeah. Thank you, Mike. So if it's okay, shall we start, Mike? I'll just
Yes.
introduce you quickly. Yeah, okay. All right. So colleagues and student, we have Mike from Hendon Campus, who is here, who kindly agreed to run this workshop and on NVIVO. This comes from requests from students and academics who wanted to know how to use the software whenever they're going to do qualitative analysis. And I do believe that this is not just for academics, but it is also for non-academic staff as well, who's going to get involved in data collection, mostly on interviews and focus group that is qualitative. So I'll stop here. I'll let Mike to introduce himself and start the session. Thank you, Mike.
Yeah, thanks, Ash, and good afternoon in Mauritius, I guess. So yeah, my name is Mike O'Driscoll, and I'm a researcher, based at Hendon, and a lot of my research is sort of mixed methods, and particularly around evaluations in NHS related and student experience. So NHS workforce, student experience, health and education kind of topics. Sorry, I'm just going to admit some more people. I'm glad so many people have turned up. This is good. So so I mean, basically, one of the things that I'm interested in is the use of technology in research, and so I've taken an interest in NVIVO and SPSS over many years to see how it can just assist the research process, and basically it does make your life a lot easier. And I can remember, and occasionally you still come across people who are, sorry, I'm admitting people as fast as I can, but you still do come across people who are still trying to do qualitative coding on paper using different colored highlighters and things, and it basically it doesn't work, and it's kind of exhausting for yourselves as well, and also it doesn't doing it that way doesn't provide an audit trail for if you're doing a postgrad degree or something, then you've got no audit trail to show your supervisor. So for all sorts of reasons, obviously using something like NVIVO for qualitative research is makes sense, and I think it's become the standard thing to do now, to use some sort of software. But I mean, there are other programs which we haven't got time to talk about, and so I would recommend using NVIVO. Invest a little bit of time to get familiar with it if you haven't, and obviously hopefully today's session helps with that. But basically it will, even though it may take a little time to get used to it, it will save you a lot of time in the longer run, I believe. So I will run I've got a little sort of demonstration project. I'll share the screen in a second, and I'll stop for questions periodically, and then at the end of the hour, we if we've got time, I'm happy to spend up to 30 minutes taking questions on your own research, or things that you are doing or may be planning to do, but I'll run through some of the basics now anyway, in terms of how you get the data into NVIVO and how you analyze it. So hopefully you can all see the NVIVO screen there. Is that, can everybody see that? If you could just nod. Yep. Yeah, thank you.
Yep.
Thanks. So this is a blank NVIVO file. And I'll just start with the basics about how to bring in files. I mean, very typically, what we're talking about in NVIVO, not always, but often it's interviews or focus groups, which have been transcribed into a Word document or some document, and it's that you want to analyze. But obviously NVIVO, it doesn't have to be just for that. It can be almost anything, video, documents. It's often used for literature review, actually, which is really efficient tool for literature review. But today I'll be looking mainly at analyzing focus group and interview data, and if we get time, it's also useful for analyzing open-ended responses in survey data, which is something I like to use it for. So I'll include survey data if we get time. But just to start with the basics anyway, how do you bring in interview files? So let's say that I've done some interviews here. Actually, I won't use that one. So let's say I've done some interviews, and this is an example project was about, this is made up data, but it's about, let's say the evaluation of a well-being center. And a well-being center is, for older people, which is basically, somewhere where they drop in for social activities or, maybe a primary healthcare checkup. So with the imaginary project is, an evaluation of a well-being center for older people. And the evaluation involved doing interviews with them and a focus group about their experiences. So I've done these interviews, 10 interviews, and in this imaginary example, it's, there was one interview per person, and they've each interview transcribed into a Word document. Incidentally, yeah, there's some things I could say about transcription later, but the bottom line is, probably don't do it yourself. You can outsource transcribing quite easily, and also now, AI tools are very good in terms of doing a sort of pretty accurate transcription, which you can then go through and tidy up. But anyway, that's a slightly separate matter. So just bringing the interviews into NVIVO to start the process. Well, one way you can do it is, you've got your interviews here, select all of them, and I can just drag them across into the files section in the blank NVIVO project. So it's just simple as that on that level. It's bringing them in now. But one thing we have to think about is cases. So, the concept of cases is very important in NVIVO. And a case basically refers to a sort of a suitcase, if you like, or a shell, a container where you put in all of the information that you might have about, usually we're talking about a person. So, for instance, their demographics is an obvious instance of that. The age, gender, etc. of the person. So that's not actually, you may have asked that in the interview or not. You may know it from some other source. So it's in a way, it's kind of metadata. It's data associated with the interview, which may or may not be in the interview. So we need to create a case, because for the simple reason that there may be other information that we want to associate to the interview. So I'll show you how to do that. So obviously, if we just select all of them, and in this instance, we've only got one interview from each person. So it's going to be very easy to create cases. So we just select them all, right click, create as cases, and then we say person. So we're all of these cases are people. That's that's true about 99.9% of the time, but in theory it could be something else like an organization, or even a country. Because it depends what your approach is, what your research approach is. But nearly all of the time, the cases are people. So we do okay on that, and now we can see we've got what's called a classification sheet on the right, and it gives us standard categories associated with people, whereby we can put in their demographic data, name, age, occupation. These are the standard categories that are provided, but you can add new attributes as needed. So if you wanted to put in something that wasn't here, like person's sexual orientation, you could just create a new variable for that by going to case classifications, person, click on any of these cases, and new attribute. So let's just say it was sexual orientation.
Mike, sorry to interrupt. I think
Yes.
we have some other members waiting to be admitted.
Oh, so,
in the
I'm
room.
sorry. Yeah.
Yeah.
Just 1 second. Oops, sorry about that. Yeah, that should all be admitting them now. Just wait for it to do that.
Yeah,
Oh,
they are here.
okay, great. Well, I'm impressed so many people have come. I'm reassured. So, apologies to those if you were left in the waiting room there. I wasn't monitoring that. Sorry. So yeah, do give me a shout if there's anybody building up there.
Okay,
If I was smarter, I would have made you the co-host, Ash, and then you could you could.
that's all right.
So yeah, so I've imported some interviews and I've set them up as cases, which is a way of adding. Yeah, sorry, could you put yourself on mute, everybody, if because just getting some background noise. Thanks. So here we've got the a way of adding information to the case. So the person's gender, etc. And I was just about to add a new attribute there for sexual orientation. It depends what's relevant for your project. This might not be at all relevant, but just to show the point that you can add new variables. And so I've created a new attribute, as they're called, sexual orientation, and the values. Well, obviously, you can imagine the usual categories of heterosexual, LGBTQ2, etc. So I won't bother adding them all, but yeah, it's just for illustration. So, oops, yeah, I've created a. Let's just say I wanted to add, prefer not to say option. So now if we scroll along to the right, we can see that, that's there. So we can now code each person, according to those categories. So so why do we even want to do that? Well, it depends on your project, as I say, but quite often you may want to be in a position where you can break down the coding at the end of the process by age, gender, or whatever other variables you're interested in, the country the person lives in or born in. So it's a decision for you to make about, whether you need to do any of this. Will you want at any point to break down your coding by age, gender, sex, or any other variable? Is it relevant for your research question? If it is, then, we need to have the attributes. And, as you can see, you can easily fill that in. At the end of the process or during the process, it doesn't matter. Okay, anyway, so we brought in these files. Those are the interview transcripts. We set up a case for each person, which is the kind of container to add the attribute information. So that's that part of it, I think, is I hope is reasonably straightforward. I'll just show you how it's I'll delete those, and I'll just show you how it varies slightly if you had more than one. If you had more than one interview per person, it would have to work slightly differently. So I've got a situation here where some people we've got 2 interviews for some people. So in that case, we can still just oops, yeah, not there. So I'm just waiting for something. So we again, we could just drag the files across. The slight complication here is that for 2 people, Albert and Robert, we've got a pre and a post interview. So that would be obviously where they might have been interviewed near the start when they came into this wellbeing center for the first time, and then maybe, let's say, 6 months later. So in this example, we've now got 2 interviews for some of the people. So if we were to right click and do create as cases, we're going to have the obvious problem that it will create a separate case for the pre and post interviews, because it doesn't know that these are both the same person, Robert A and at pre and Robert at post. It doesn't know that. So there's various ways we could handle that, but the simplest one would be.
Mike, sorry again.
Okay.
I've just got the message. We have about 7 students waiting to be admitted.
Okay. I'm not seeing that.
All right, they might have dropped off now, maybe.
Okay, we've got about 26 in the room. So I don't see anybody in the waiting room now.
That's fine. Let's carry on. Doesn't matter. I'll just yeah.
If you see any more waiting, do give me a shout.
Mike, could you make me co-host, please?
Yes, I will try. I should have done that at the start, actually. Yeah, it's not that difficult. There you go. Sorry.
Okay, thank you.
So you're co-host now, Ash, so you should, yeah.
Right. All right, okay, thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, sorry about that. I should have done that, my mistake. But anyway, so yeah, so this is an example where, you know, we've got more than one interview per person, which, you know, can often be the case. And so I'm, you know, just making the point that the way we create cases then becomes slightly more tricky, because we can't just do, you know, create as cases. That will create one, you know, that will create 2 cases for Robert, for example. So we can still do this, create as cases. Oops. Sorry, just bear with me. So this was from the previous example. I'm just getting rid of that. Sorry, we'll get to the interesting stuff soon, but this is actually quite important as well, believe it or not, about the cases. So I'm spending a little time on it. So we've just imported some interviews. There's more than one interview for some people. So create as cases, person, do okay. Now, if we go to the cases, obviously we've got, you know, 2 cases for Robert, because the, you know, software doesn't know this is the same person. We've got it, you know, there's no way for it to know that. So what we can simply do is merge the cases. So if I click on Robert post and click on free and then do merge into selected case. So now we've only got one case for Robert again, and that can do the same for Albert. So again, we end up with one case per person, which is, you know, what we want, because obviously if you're adding the demographics, you know, you don't want to have to do that twice. You know, it's one person, so there should only be one case. Anyway, bringing in focus group data, you know, again would be slightly different. I'll just show you a brief example of that, and then we'll move on to something which is perhaps more interesting, like the coding. So I'll just delete what I just did. So that's interviews, and that's the most common scenarios of interviews. But obviously another common thing is focus group data. So in this example, I've got 3 transcripts from focus groups, and I can bring these in, you know, again, on the same way. I click on files in the NVIVO project. I can just drag my transcripts across. But obviously, with focus group data, you know, obviously, you know, by definition, there's more than one person in there, so you don't, you know, you wouldn't create them as cases, because it doesn't make any sense. You know, a case is you know, going to have demographic data attached. So we don't create focus groups as cases. You just classify them as focus group, and then oops, and then we can still do the classification sheet, which is a spreadsheet where you put like the metadata. And so in this case, the information that's attached to a focus group is things like, you know, who was the moderator, who was the transcriber, number of participants. And this is information that you rarely need, but in a big project it might be sometimes useful to refer back to, just in case there's some sort of problem. Who was the transcriber? Where did it happen? So we've looked at importing files and the classification sheet. Any questions so far?
Just a message for students who joined in late. This is being recorded, and if you're just joining us, then don't worry about it. You have half an hour later to ask questions regarding your dissertation and your data collection. You can ask that to Mike, and also we'll share the link to you. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Ash. So, okay, so that covered some of the boring stuff about getting files in, but obviously that is, the key step where most people are starting from. And if the cases aren't set up properly, you may have some issues later on. But anyway, having got that out of the way, I will now move on to a file I prepared earlier, as they say, one I made earlier, where we've got the focus groups and interviews in there. They're set up as cases, and I've done some initial coding, just so that we've got something to look at. So, okay, so to start with, I'll just show you how the basic coding process works. So we've got the files, which I brought in, and we looked, we know how to do that. So to actually start the coding, simply do a double click on one of your files that you want to code, and in the right-hand pane, the text comes up from the interview, which in this case it is interviews. Okay, so this was an interview with somebody. Well, let's just say their name was Albert, even though it does say Acacia in the interview. Let's just skip over that. It's just a training thing. So anyway, this was an interview with Albert about his experience of this wellbeing center. So the first step, obviously would be just reading through the interviews and familiarizing yourself with what you've got in there. You may or may not be the person who did the interview, obviously, depending on the nature of the project. If you did the interview, obviously you already, have some understanding of what happened, and you've already got some thoughts. But if you may just be coming to it new, so it's a matter of just reading through, making a note of some initial thoughts. Also, of course, it's critical to, before you do any coding, to think about what's your theoretical approach, for want of a better term. Is it going to be grounded theory, or interpretive phenomenological analysis, or more commonly thematic analysis? And you may not be 100% sure about that, so something to reflect on before you really get stuck into it. I mean, it's fine to try a few different things, but really the method you're using should flow from, should be something you've decided quite early on. What's your analysis method going to be, your analysis approach? So a lot of people do use thematic analysis, and that's quite a broad term, which covers, I think that's why people are so happy to use it, because it covers a lot. It's hard to say that somebody's doing it wrong, because it's a very broad approach. There is a good paper by Braun and Clark, which I can you may have come across, on thematic analysis, and that really gives an exhaustive list of the approaches in thematic analysis. But essentially what you're looking for is just recurring patterns in the data, the most important recurring patterns that give insight to your research question. So so let's assume we're doing thematic analysis in this case. So obviously we would just read through the the interview line by line. So interviewer saying, can you tell me anything about being part of this network, the wellness center? And the person saying, well, it means to me, because I just retired, when I first came to the wellness center, it's sort of like a continuation to get involved with the community. I was still learning lots of things: drumming, folk dancing, ukulele, all these things are mentioned. So what parts of that you want to code, you know, it's about what's relevant to your research question, and obviously that's, you know, going to vary a lot. But let's say, you know, that I think, you know, retirement's going to be a relevant aspect of this, because the wellness center is not just for retired people, it's, you know, for older people. Some who may be working, some may still have caring responsibilities for children. So whether the person is retired or whether they're still, you know, active in the workforce or other things could be important. So I'll just highlight that section that I'm interested in. And the basic way to create a code, just do right click, code selection. Now I've already created a few codes, but let's say I want to make a new one for, you know, retirement or retired. Code selection to that. And then if I go to my codes, I can see that the code of retired is there. And under the column files, it's saying 1 and references 1. So files means how many interviews does this code, you know, occur in. References is how many times is it coded in total. So at the moment, it's just occurring in this one interview and it's only been coded once in this one interview. So that's files 1, references 1. So at any later time, you know, I can come back and I can click on this code and it will show in the right-hand pane all the instances, all the sections that were coded to that code. And that's why NVIVO, you know, it's one of the main reasons why NVIVO is so powerful, because, you know, I could have coded all 10 interviews. I might have come up with, like, you know, retired might have come up 30 times in 10 interviews. But all I've got to do is click on this code, and in the right-hand side, we'll see all the extracts from all the interviews where retired was coded. So right away, you know, you've got the extracts for that code, which you can then just drop into, you know, your report. So for instance, you know, community involvement has been coded 14 times in 5 interviews. So if I click on this now, I should be able to see all of those in the right-hand pane come up very shortly. Yeah, so it's now showing all the extracts where community involvement was coded. So it was in interview with Albert, interview with Fiona, interview with Kenzo. In this case, you know, it was only the word itself that was coded, or, you know, a few words around it. Obviously, you know, you could have coded the whole sentence, which would be much more meaningful. But I hope you can get the basic picture that you know, it's the coding process is relatively simple. But let's do a little bit more just to illustrate that. So I'm going back to this interview with Albert. I've just, you know, saw retired, which I thought was interesting, so I coded that. Let's have a look through and see what else might be interesting. So he's mentioning, you know, various activities that he does. So, you know, exercise. So we might want to code these, you know, individually. You know, folk dancing, yoga, or we might just want to, you know, create a top-level code for activities and you know, put them all under that. You know, that's a decision. That's a kind of decision you have to make all the time about, you know, what's the level of detail we want to have, granularity, and, you know, that will depend on how much time you've got and what's the kind of quality level that's expected, how much rigor is expected. You know, for a PhD, a lot. If it's just, you know, a small, quick, informal project, then, you know, much less so. So let's just say I want to code these activities anyway that Albert has mentioned: drumming, yoga, playing the ukulele.
In the meeting, I can't hear you well.
Sorry, was that a question?
A call. If you could just take a message for me, please, I'll phone back. Okay, thank you. Bye.
Right. Yeah, sorry, could you put yourself on mute if you're, everybody, unless you've got a question? Thanks. So, yeah, so I was just thinking, you know, do we want to code these activities individually, or, you know, under, you know, a top level heading, you know, higher level code of just activities, which would include all of them? So let's say that I do want to do them, you know, individually. So first of all, I'm going to look at my existing codes and just think, okay, have I already got something that would cover this. These are codes I created earlier on. So I've got activities, which I did create earlier on. But let's say that I've now decided I want to, separately code yoga and folk dancing. So I can do there's different ways of doing this, but one easy way would be, I can do right click on activities, new code, put folk dancing. Okay. And then you see it's created it underneath as a sort of subcode. So that's the code. And then I select the text I want to code that to, and I can just drag it across. So that's one way of doing it. There's other ways. For instance, I can select the text and do code selection, and this brings up a complete list of the available codes, and I could then click on folk dancing and code it there if I hadn't already done it. Or I can create new codes. So often, as your coding frame develops and you've got a lot of codes, you're probably going to want to code, an extract to more than one code. It'd be quite common to code an extract, i.e. a bit of text, to 2 or 3 codes. So in that case, dragging across to those 3 codes separately would be laborious. So if I wanted to code this bit of text to 3 separate codes, the simplest way would be the option that I just showed you. So right click, code selection, and then, I can select all the ones that I want to code it to. And, it would code it to all 3 of those codes at the same time. But if I just want to code to one code, drag and drop may be easier. So I created a code for folk dancing. Let's say I want to do for ukulele. And again, you have to make a choice about how much of the extract you want, coded to ukulele. I mean, usually it's, at least a few lines around that. So, to make sense of it, if I just coded the word ukulele, when I go back and look at the extract, that's not very helpful. I just see the word ukulele. So, I need to code the sentence around it usually. So code selection, I could click on activities, create new code, ukulele, code selection, and so there we go, and so on. So that is, on the simplest level, that is how you code the data, and I hope you would agree it's not very difficult. I'll do a few more examples just to underline it. So here somebody's mentioned lifelong learning. Sorry, Albert has mentioned lifelong learning. So I might code a few lines around that. Code selection. Click on. In this case, I'll be clicking on. It's not a subsection of activities. It's a new code. So just it's a top level code of lifelong learning. It's not a subcode of anything just yet. It you might decide it is later on, but at the moment it's just a code on its own. So the lifelong learning, appears. Any questions on that?
Mike, when we have several, let's say, interviewees, do we need to code the chunks as per the interviewee's name as well, just to separate who said what?
Do you mean, do you mean like within a transcript, if it was a focus group and you had several people?
Yeah.
There's ways of doing that. Obviously, in an interview, it doesn't. If it's a one-to-one interview, this it doesn't really arise. You only need to distinguish between the interviewer and the interviewee. But in a focus group, it would be good practice to do that. So hopefully in the transcript, if you want to do that, obviously you need to have it in the transcript. You need to have that distinguished in the transcript that it's person A, person B, etc., which is actually it doesn't, in my experience, doesn't happen that often. It probably should do, but transcribers often are not going to do that. You know, and sometimes they don't have the information. I mean, if you need video really to do that effectively, there needs to be a video recording, because otherwise the transcriber, well, you need a video recording or you need to have been there. And, you know, because
Okay.
otherwise, yeah, if you give it to a transcriber, you know, it's very hard for them to say, okay, this is person A, you know, again, and this is the person A later, you know, unless they've got really distinctive voices.
Yeah.
So if it's in the transcript, that's the key thing. Then yes, you can. There's ways of, you know, semi-automatically doing that.
Okay.
Through things like auto code, and let's just have a quick look at that. So as you can see there, I hope you can see that. So it says speaker name, paragraph starts. So this would be a way you set up the transcript so that it's got the speaker name in it, and then you can tell NVIVO, as it were, that this is the speaker name through using a particular sort of paragraph style to flag that. So I won't go into that in great detail, but you could set this up. So let's say that I've got the name of everybody in the transcript. The person's name is there every time they speak. I always code the name of the speaker as heading 1 in the Word document. So then I could set up this autocode wizard to say to NVIVO, every time you see heading 1, that's somebody's name. That's the speaker's name.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Then it will automatically go through the transcript and code the name.
But so it also works with just with one person. If we want to differentiate between the interviewer and the interviewee. So, okay, all right, thank you.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, you say same thing. You could just write heading 1 would either be, you know, interviewee or interviewer, or, you know, you can do it various ways. Here they've used P and L, which I'm not sure exactly what that stands for, but, you know, it could be, it doesn't matter as long as they're clearly distinguished. You know, it could just be X and Y. Just anything that you use consistently as a token to indicate this is the interviewer, this is the interviewee. It could even be a number, you know, it could be 300 and 400. So yeah, you can do that, and I think it is good to do that, but yeah, quite often that's something that gets missed, and people tend to do it as people don't tend to track through the interview or the focus group and say, okay, you know, this is what the person said at this point and the other point. We just tend to get it all, you know, jumbled together quite often, and just pulling out the main themes without tracking how one individual might have changed their view through an interview. So yeah, very, very good point. And if I was doing it for a, you know, doctoral level or something, I definitely should try and do that. So any other questions? No? Okay, so I hope I've illustrated, like, you know, some basic aspects of the coding. One other thing I would say on coding is there is something called in vivo coding, and that's where the text you select is also the name of the code you want to create. So let's just say I wanted to have a code for September, for example. Let's just say I was interested in things that happened in September. I could just do right click on that, code in vivo, and that will create a code called September. So it's a way of creating a code that is the same as the text selected, so you don't have to create a separate name for the code. I don't often find that useful, actually. It's not one that is particularly useful to me, but yeah, all depends on the project. It could be. Yeah, some other tools you know available for the coding. Sorry, I'm just trying to get that out of my way. Yeah, you've got I really wish they wouldn't put that green thing there. So yeah, I mean, you've got some sort of semi-automated tools. So we could do a text search, you know, where you're looking for a particular phrase in the, in the transcript. So let's have a look at that. Text search. Just waiting for that to come up. So there might be a phrase we're interested in. Let's say well-being. So we can just type in that, and then we've got some options here. Spread to means, do you just want to find the word itself, or do you want to, do you want to code around, the whole sentence or the whole paragraph? So usually I would say broad context, which means it will code the section around the word, so that when you click on the code, you're not just seeing the word well-being, you're seeing the whole sentence that it was situated in, which is usually what you want. And then, some obvious options, like, do you want it to just be the exact match, or would it be any word beginning with that term? So for instance, if we were looking for, let's say we were looking for things to do with nursing, we could put NURS asterisk, and then that's going to find, nurse, nursing, nurses, anything that begins with nurse. So we could put NURS asterisk, or choose that stemmed words, which is the same thing, and then it would just find anything that begins with those letters. And the slightly cleverer stuff, I suppose, is synonyms. So it will find words that mean the same as the word you're searching for. Not sure how intelligent that is at the moment. Not very, I think. But as a useful first step in exploring the data. So we've got. Let's just go with well-being, because I know that does come up a number of times. So what we're trying to tell it to do is to search all of the interviews and focus groups for the term well-being, because that's something we're interested in for our research question. So we have to tell it which documents to search, which files. So in this case, it's going to be all of the interviews and all of the focus groups. So it's OK. And then, yeah, I'll just go for exact matches, and then run query, and that's going to search all of those, all of the 10 interviews that I put in, and the 3 focus groups. So you can see that's quite a quick and useful thing to do. And references is means how many times did it find that term in each interview or focus group. So in the Albert interview, it came up 4 times. In the first focus group, it came up 5 times. So the references is where you can see. So it's just taking a while to do that. You can see the actual extracts where it came up in each interview. So reference 1 means the first reference it found. So all of these are in focus group 1. That's the heading. So it's showing us all the extracts where it found well-being, the term well-being in focus group 1. And if we carry on down, then it's showing us all the times it found well-being in focus group 2, and so on. So you can see that is quick and easy to do. So you might want to, you can then save those results as a code, and add it to your list of codes. So let's do save results. Codes. So it's just it should create a new code now, which we can choose what to call it. Obviously, the name you use should be something that reminds you what it is for when you come back. And sometime later, you might not remember how you generated this code. So I would call it well-being text search, to remind me that this was generated through an automatic search, as opposed to me going through and doing it myself, because there's different implications. Yeah, there's the option to put a description as well. So you could put a note in there that it was a text search, but I found it easier to just put it in the code name, so you can see straight away this was one that was done automatically, rather than one you did yourself. Because it's just useful to bear that in mind. So let me just do OK, and we should see the new code created there. Yeah. So that tells us that it came up in the well-being code came up in 12 files. So that's, you know, interviews or focus groups. And there was 59 instances of well-being being mentioned. So if you were, you know, starting your coding from a perspective that, you know, you already sort of knew what you were looking for in some ways, you know, particularly if you had a, you know, let's say it's a, you know, a subject's been well researched, there's a lot of literature, so and you might have already decided to use some sort of theoretical framework. So, you know, you might well have a list of terms that you're looking for, you know, as defined from literature. That would be a reasonable starting point. You wouldn't necessarily want to do the whole coding on that, you know, sort of semi-automated basis, as it were, or semi-predetermined. But yeah, but it depends. It depends on your theoretical framework. You might have a very positivistic outlook, despite the fact that you were doing qualitative research. And, you know, you might just be interested in finding, you know, these particular concepts. You know, so you might come up with a list of 10 key terms and look for them, or variations of them. And, you know, that would be one simple and quick way to do the coding. And just to highlight, you know, the beauty of NVIVO, you know, you click on the code and, you know, all of the extracts appear on the right. So, you know, then it's just quite easy to drop those into, to copy and paste those, you know, or selected examples into your report. I mean, as for actually creating the themes, obviously you would first have to go through and do all of the coding. And then you might want to arrange the codes into sort of hierarchies. So, you know, one heading might be activities, another one might be the stage of life that the person is at in terms of, you know, are they retired, are they working, are they having caring responsibilities? Another one might be their, you know, their state of physical and mental health. Those might be the themes, but that will only become apparent, you know, as you go through and do all of the coding, and then you arrange the codes into, you know, top level and subcodes. And then eventually, you know, you'll see that, you know, some codes are having a lot, you know, are quite rich. Many instances have been coded to them, and others, you know, there's only one or two. So the codes where, you know, there's more coding are, you know, probably going to suggest where the themes are. Although it's not, you know, not quite as simple as that. It's not a quantitative exercise where, you know, the most codes equals, it must be a theme. You know, it's qualitative research. So the theme comes out of your own, you know, thinking and interaction with the data. But generally speaking, where most of the coding occurs, you know, that's probably going to be a theme. So, and any questions? No? Okay. Well, just think what else I could usefully show you there. Well, yeah, okay, so I will have a look at matrix queries, which is a way of breaking down the data. Once you've done all the coding, you know, you might want to break down the coding according to demographics, for example, as we were saying before. So let's just have a quick look at a matrix query as one example of you know, ways that you can break down the coding or explore the coding further. So if you've done any quantitative research, or if you've used SPSS, you're probably familiar with, you know, the idea of a crosstab, a cross tabulation, which is where you break down one variable against another. So, for example, we might break down satisfaction with something by, you know, gender. How does male and female satisfaction compare? So this is kind of the qualitative equivalent, where, you know, you take one aspect, such as a code, and you break it down by another aspect, such as the demographics. But it doesn't have to, you know, just be the demographics. But anyway, let's look at an example. So let's say I want to break down some coding. Okay, let's choose well-being. As we know, we've got a lot of coding in there. So we want to break down the code well-being by, let's see if we've got anything under case classifications. Yeah. Okay, I don't think I've actually entered the demographic data, so that might, let's see. Let's break it down by another code. So in this case, what I'm doing is seeing how many times when they mentioned well-being, how do the references to well-being break down against particular activities, such as, folk dancing and ukulele playing, for example. So I know I've only got a couple of codes on those, so this isn't going to be a very great example, but oops, yeah, I didn't find anything in fact. So let me try that again with something else. Community. Oops. Yeah, sorry about that. So normally you'd be using that to break down, against demographic data, but I don't think I've actually put it in. Yeah, just sorry, both these. Yeah, so I haven't actually put in the all of this. So I just okay, I've got two that have got some demographic data. So obviously I should, if it's a real project, I would have put all of this in, but I haven't done that yet. So but just to illustrate the process, let me try and do this matrix coding again. Yeah. Thank you. So sorry, just bear with me a second. I hope this will make sense very shortly. So I'm trying to break down this code well-being against the the demographics, for instance, of the respondents, although I've only got very limited data entered so far about that. So, but for 2 respondents, the age data is in there, so we should get perhaps something out of this. Okay, so yeah, and I've only got 2 age bands, but never mind. Okay, so that was not a very great example, but we've got two age groups here, 18 to 30 and 31 to 50. And so what happened there was that I asked it to break down the reference, where well-being had been coded, how did it break down by age group? And so what we found is that, there were 4 instances where the age group was where people 18 to 30 mentioned well-being, and no instances where people 31 to 50 mentioned it. So even though that was a bit limited by the fact that I haven't put in the age data, I hope you can get the idea that, you can break down any codes you've created by, gender, age, or anything else, such as sexual orientation, or, as in the earlier example, ethnicity. You can break down your coding by any attributes of the person. So any questions on that? No? Okay. Let's just check what else I could usefully show you. I mean, yeah, there's various sorts of visualizations you can do in NVIVO. I have to say, I don't find most of them that useful. People like to do things like word clouds, but really, I think they are a bit of a gimmick, and often not that useful in my experience. But let's just have a look at some of the charts we could do. Oh yeah, one other thing I should have mentioned, sorry, is word frequency. I mean, that can actually be quite useful sometimes. Obviously, when you're doing qualitative research, you're not usually trying to take a sort of positivistic approach where you're just counting how many times each word is mentioned, because that doesn't tell you about the meaning very much. If people said transport a lot, on its own, that doesn't tell you anything. Were they saying it was good, it was bad, they don't care about it, or they're passionate about it? We don't know. but just to note that you can do you can count the number of words, which I suppose might sometimes give you a quick insight into some of the important issues. But as you can see, it tends to be not that useful. Obviously, you're going to get a lot of ands and buts and stuff, but yeah, it might sometimes be useful as a quick, really quick sort of way to get into the data, especially if you had, a large number of interviews or a huge amount of data, and you can do a word cloud from that, which seems to be much beloved of qualitative researchers. So I'm personally a bit skeptical. It's taking a while to generate that there, but I imagine you've all seen this sort of thing anyway, word clouds, and yeah, there we go. So yeah, I mean, it may be some useful sort of it's certainly good to break up your report, with some charts or graphics. So in that sense, it may be useful. So yeah, so I mean, so those are some of the main aspects of coding, and the matrix query in particular is very useful for breaking down your coding on demographics or other things that may be of interest to you in the data. But it really depends on your research question whether that's going to be a useful thing to do or not. But we know, as well, researchers know that, or social scientists know that experiences do often vary on key demographic variables of age and gender and class, etc. So I wouldn't say it's not obligatory to analyze your data that way, but most times you're probably going to find something interesting if you do it. Some interesting differences will usually be there, but may not be relevant to your research. So yeah, I realize I think staff will have to leave soon, so that's fine, but I'll carry on with I'll just ask if there's any questions at this point, and then I'll move on to looking at survey data in NVIVO. And any questions?
If I may, hello, can you hear me?
Yes, carry on.
Thank you so much for this great session. I wanted to ask whether you have some experience using NVIVO to do literature reviews or systematic or even scoping reviews, and if yes, what kind of advice might you give, or is there anything that we should be particularly mindful when we do that through NVIVO? Thank you so much.
Yeah, no, good question. Yeah, I've done some literature reviews in NVIVO. Yeah, not loads. I wish I had time to do more in NVIVO. It requires a little bit of setup, I guess, but it's going to give you a much more effective literature review. So in terms of what tips I could recommend on that, yeah, I don't know. I mean, the process itself is reasonably straightforward. You bring in the files. Okay, you've got to get your PDFs together from the articles that you're interested in, and bring import them in the same way that we brought in the interview files. It's one way of doing it, and then there's various attributes you can put on each one. In the same way that for the interviews we put on the attributes of for the cases we put on the attributes of age and gender, ethnicity, blah blah. For the attributes for an academic paper will obviously be other things such as author, year of publication, and you can put on whatever you like. The attributes could include thematic aspects such as papers that are positive about a particular subject or negative about a particular subject, and then that gives you a very powerful sort of way to filter those papers. So if you put a set of papers in there, PDFs, and then you could code each one in the attributes as positive, negative, or neutral, for example, on the topic. I mean, often it's going to be much more complicated than that, but it's worth thinking about what sort of attributes you want to put on each paper. Things that are going to make it easier for you to filter your coding, because the coding will be pretty much similar to the way we analyzed interview data. You're going through and reading Let's imagine this is a paper, an academic paper instead of a focus group transcript. You'd import it in more or less exactly the same way. And then, we read through and we code it almost in the same way. Highlighting the bits that seem particularly relevant to a research question and creating a code. And from that, again, you might want to do thematic analysis to pull out the major themes from each paper. But also there's the critical appraisal aspects of literature review. So you might want to code them according to the methodology used, whether it was quantitative, qualitative, mixed methods. You might want to put in things like some sort of rating of the quality of the paper based on your critical appraisal. Is it great quality paper, large sample, for example, very rigorously done as far as you could tell, or was it just some very small sample, informal study, and rate them on quality. Because in the literature review, I guess there's two main aspects, which is number one, pulling out the main themes from the literature in relation to your research question, and also, if you're doing it properly, you have to give some sort of assessment of the quality, which is critical appraisal. And that bit often gets missed in literature reviews. People just say, oh well, Smith 1982 says blah, but less often people say Smith 1982 in a very poorly conducted survey said blah. So to do a literature review properly, ideally you cover both of those aspects of the quality and the themes. Obviously, if you're doing a systematic review or something, then different things apply, and that wouldn't necessarily be about pulling out themes alone. It's a much more quantitative exercise. But yeah, and can I ask you, have you ever tried to do a literature review in NVIVO?
So I have one to thank you so much for asking. I have one that I need to do right now, and I was wondering whether I should use NVIVO to do so in order to either be more rigorous in the way that I do it,
yes,
but also whether that's gonna save me some time if I make the time to be able to construct the various aspect of NVIVO, or would that be just easier to just do it in Excel like everybody would do? Does that make sense?
How many papers are we talking about roughly? Do you know?
More than 150.
More than 150? Yeah. Okay. Well, that's a lot. So
yes.
Yeah, I mean, I would definitely use NVIVO myself for that many.
Okay.
I mean, is that 150? After you've done all of the filtering out, these are the 150 that you will actually review, or you still choose from them.
So it's kind of, yes, it's so basically I'm building up on an existing scoping review which already has around 112, and it's already a few years old, so I'm anticipating getting around 40 or 50 more that would build up on it. And I was planning on using kind of the same attributes like you are mentioning from the first scoping review, and then adding a couple more, so that kind of updating that scoping review in a sense, right? So even though I'm not going to read 112 papers, I would like to have them coded within it, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, I mean, I would definitely personally, I would definitely prefer to use NVIVO than Excel. NVIVO is so much more flexible in terms of what you can code onto for each paper. I mean, in Excel, I mean, I guess you have to create a column for each kind of piece of information that you want to attach to that paper. It's so much easier to do that in NVIVO. So I can just create a code for everything, just so easily by just selecting some text and do code selection and create a code. Or for more sort of quantitative aspects, you've got the classification sheet. sorry, I took my student to. Sorry, so obviously, if you had if we're talking about academic papers, these attributes here would be, well, it would include, the author's names, the year, country that it was done in, maybe methods, plus you could, add any other attribute here that you thought was relevant, the sort of things that you would be creating columns for in Excel. You can just add new attribute here. And you've got, sorry, I'm just going to open the class, try and open the classification sheet. So, you would have a spreadsheet like this, except that the headings would be different. There would be you'd have the names of the authors, but you'd have the year of publication, the title, maybe the journal probably. And then you could have, one column for each, topic 1, topic 2, topic 3. Maybe you have one for the methods. Maybe you have one where you give it an overall rating for quality after you've, assessed it.
Thank you. You've convinced me to use it actually. Thanks a lot, Dr.
Well, I think it's definitely worth it. And added bonus, you'll obviously get familiar with NVIVO for other work. So if you have to invest a couple of hours, then it won't just be useful for that project. It'll probably be useful generally for other things. But yeah, I would definitely do it. And yeah, also, I think it's got I haven't explored this too much, but if you were compiling your existing literature review in something like Mendeley or other bibliographical managers, I think you can import those into NVIVO directly. So
do you know any kind of integration between NVIVO and Zotero, for example, or I should be able to figure out a way to export those data from Zotero to here?
I couldn't say specifically on that, but I think it covers all the obvious options, the ones that people use most often.
Right, that's a great point. I'll explore it. Thank you so much. Unfortunately, I'll have to leave,
Sure.
Doctor, but it was a wonderful session. Thank you.
No, thanks for
Bye-bye.
the question. Feel free to email me if you get stuck on that.
Thank you so much.
Take care.
If I may share, Nick, I was more of a Mendeley person,
Oh yeah.
but very recently I've tried to use NVIVO for my literature review. The best thing I've seen is not only obviously it's easier to use NVIVO for literature review, like you said, in terms of cases and categories and so on, but also it links my data collection, my interviews with the literature as well. If I have a query, if I have to run a query. So this is new because I've never really relied on NVIVO before, but I can see, for students who can hear me right now, massive advantage if you can use NVIVO as well for your literature review. That is, for me, that is excellent because, like I said, it connects my data and the analysis of my data and the queries and so on with the literature review, and I find it quite useful.
Yeah. I think that's really good advice, and a little bit of time needed to familiarize yourself with the software, as with all of these things. But it's time well invested, and it's going to save you, especially if you've got a lot of papers. It's going to be a massive time saving, and also you're going to end up with a better quality literature review almost certainly. And there's an audit trail, so it means if you needed to involve other people, if it's something your supervisor's going to have to look at, or even if you just wanted to collaborate on the review with other people, it's way easier because they can see what you've done. So yeah, it's definitely recommended. I just haven't. I often don't get time. Something more sort of quick and dirty, so to speak, is often required. But yeah, to do a proper literature review, I would certainly use NVIVO. So well worth looking into. And I haven't looked specifically, but I'm sure there's loads of YouTube videos on that as well. There tends to be plenty of videos on that sort of thing, on importing Mendeley and other formats into NVIVO. So thanks for that. So if that's all, if there's no other questions, then I shall move on to a quick look at importing survey data.
Sure, no problem.
Great. So yeah, so this is one of the good uses of NVIVO that most, doesn't often get. A lot of people don't do this. So open-ended survey data, I think is really useful source of data and very underrated for a lot of different reasons. When you do a survey, a lot of the time, there may not be an existing questionnaire, there may not be existing research on the subject. So, frankly, you don't always know what questions to ask. Okay, you can try, you can do some, you can do a literature review, you can do a bit of piloting, but, unless it's a really well-known topic and there's validated instruments, you simply will not know what questions to ask. And so therefore, it's always great to have a few open-endeds where, it's something that you may not even have thought of, somebody can give good insight into a topic. So open-ended questions and surveys are great in principle, used sparingly, and also being aware of how much work they could potentially create, because unlike a quantitative question, it actually matters how many respondents there are for open-ended. For SPSS, it doesn't matter if it's 10 or 1 million. It takes the same amount of time to process the quantitative questions. But obviously, for open-ended, you need to read them. But NVIVO can, very much help you with that. So, and also, this is another key thing. If you analyze the open-ended in NVIVO, you can link the coding to any other question in the survey. And that includes, again, the demographics. So that's one obvious application. If you code an open-ended question in NVIVO, and if you've set it up properly, I can then break down the coding by, gender, age, or any other question in the survey, in fact, not just demographics. So let's have a quick look at how we import survey data. So computer has been behaving itself quite well up till now. Okay. Just had a bit of a wobble there. Let's see. Yeah, so to get the data into a format where you could import it into NVIVO, basically you have to put it into Excel. So you might, it might already be in Excel, but if it was in SPSS, then you would just do, save as and create an Excel version. And yeah, the key things to bear in mind are that you want to have only one header row in the Excel file, because otherwise that can confuse it. And you also want to have a column. If there isn't an ID number, you want to create a column and make an ID number for each respondent. So in all survey data files that I can think of, one row is one case, one row is one person. So each row has to have an ID number. Otherwise it could get complicated. So I would open this Excel file to have a look at it, but I know my computer is fairly slow and that might freeze things up. So I'll skip that stage. But let's just say that Excel file is, the data was in SPSS, and then I saved it as Excel. And now I want to import that to my NVIVO file. So I go to import, it's got a survey tab. Well, this is interesting, because it's got options for Qualtrics and SurveyMonkey, but really they don't really work very well. So I would just ignore that. I could say more about it, but essentially they're not useful. So Excel. Go to my file. To open. And then we should, so then we get this survey import wizard. And the key thing in this is to tell NVIVO which are the closed questions, which means, the quantitative questions, pre-coded ones such as, which age band are you in, or, how satisfied were you with whatever it is. So those are, closed questions means pre-coded, and open-ended obviously are the ones where you write in, your own thoughts in your own words. So NVIVO needs to be able to distinguish between these two, because they will be treated very differently in how they're imported. So it is able to have a reasonable guess, you know, by assessing the data file. It has a look. That's just telling us that everything's kind of lined up okay. You know, we'd be worried if we saw some age group data in this column, for example. It would mean, you know, something had gone wrong, but it all seems to be lined up nicely. But so the next bit is, as I was saying, you know, we need to, NVIVO will have a guess. Okay, the next screen is actually where it's telling you, you know, which row should it use for, you know, an ID. And I've actually created a column called row ID. So if you know, that's what I'm saying, you need to do that before you put in the Excel file. Create new classification for survey respondent, just leave that on default. Don't have to worry about that. So sorry, this is what I was referring to, where it has, you know, it has a guess for each question in your survey. It's having a guess about whether it's a pre-coded or an open-ended, and it's reasonably accurate, but not 100%. So you have to go through, usually with a copy of your questionnaire, and you go, okay, question 18A2, you know, was that actually open-ended or not? So as it stands, it's, you know, it's guessing that 3 questions are open-ended, and, you know, for the purposes of this exercise, let's assume that's correct. And all the other questions are pre-coded questions. So then we do finish, and now it's working its magic. That's nothing to do with it, just ignore that. So it's now bringing in the, I don't know why it's doing that, to be honest. That's nothing to do with this process. That's just to do with some earlier query we created. So it's imported the survey data. It's created a case for each survey respondent. So again, we come back to the concept of case, which I can discuss further later. And so, but the key thing is, for each open-ended question, it's created a place where you can put the codes. So when you go through and you read the open-ended responses and you assign a code to them exactly in the same way as you did for the interview data, it's created a place to put those codes for each question. So that's just a sort of, it's showing you a sort of spreadsheet view of the survey data, which we don't need, so won't worry about that. So let's just look at where it's put the, yeah. So I'll just close all of that because it's confusing. So all we're interested in at the moment is the open-ended questions, and there was 3. So if you can see for each one here, it's created a sort of top-level code. So question 18A2 was, you know, why do you come to the Wellbeing Centre? So if we click on this, we'll see all of the open-ended responses to that question in a second. Yeah, there we go. So there were 66 respondents, so that's why it's saying 66. And we can see, yeah, these are the open-ended responses that people put in relation to that question. Why do you come to the Wellbeing Centre? So this person saying fibromyalgia, arthritis. I come for the company, to move and feel better, etc. So now we can just code these in exactly the same way as interview data. So let's say I just want to code, you know, why do we come? Why do they come to the Wellbeing Centre? I want to create a new code called, you know, fibromyalgia, and I want to put that code, you know, under the survey data. I don't want to put it down here because it'll get mixed up with my focus group codes, which could be awkward. So I want to put the code, you know, under the survey heading, which is there, and I want to make sure it's, you know, on the right question, question 18A2. You could create a set of codes that, you know, apply to all 3 open-ended questions, but, you know, it generally doesn't work and it gets messy. So you want to, you know, separate codes for each open-ended question usually. So let's put fibromyalgia. And then we should see that code appears under question 18A2. And I could do the same for, you know, arthritis. Again, I go to make sure I'm navigating to the right place, which is the question 18A2, arthritis. and so on. And, just go through all my open-ended questions and do that, and so, and then at the end, as with the interview data, I can just click on the relevant code, and in the right-hand side, and the extracts that I've coded to that will appear. At the moment, it's only one, but, obviously it could be a lot. And so, from that, you could, again, do a sort of thematic analysis, which is, seeing where most of the codes cluster, which codes have the most coding to them, and then arranging them in hierarchical order. So we could create a new code here called, alleviate pain, perhaps, which, might cover arthritis and fibromyalgia, just as an illustration. And let's say we wanted to make arthritis and fibromyalgia subcodes of alleviating pain, in terms of reasons for coming. So we just select those two and do cut and do paste. And then they become subcodes of that. So in that way, by doing hierarchical top level, sub-level codes, eventually it will become clear, what the themes are. Although, as I say, it's not necessarily, most codes equals a theme, but there's usually an association. More codes usually means a theme. But, you might generate a theme with a lot of codes, but yet it has no, real relevance to your research question. So then you probably wouldn't use it as a theme because it's not adding any insight. One other thing I should mention, actually, which applies to the coding on this and on the interviews, is this thing called aggregate coding from children. So the children means the subcodes. This is the parent code. These are the children codes, child codes. So at the moment, you can see this alleviate pain one, it's showing 0. And that, but usually what we want to do is choose aggregate coding from children so that the count for these two subcodes is included in the top level one. And then it becomes clear, which codes have got the most coding to them. And so, the same thing for the other open-ended questions. You just click this question 18A3, which was asking something like, what contribution to your health and well-being does the Wellbeing Centre make? This somewhat overlaps with the previous question. I mean, perhaps not really great questions because they're sort of overlapping a lot, but it might be a slightly different emphasis. So again, I could just I could go through and select each one that I think is relevant. This person saying, it's kept me focused on my responsibilities, helped me prioritize my activities. So I could just do a code, focus my responsibilities. So I want to go to 18A3, create a new code, focus my responsibilities. Okay, I'm not even sure what that means, to be honest, but I think it's talking about prioritizing, getting a sense of what's important in their life. So you can see that code is there now. So that is basically a quick look at how you code the open-ended responses in NVIVO, which is a lot more organized than just doing it in Excel or something. And by clicking on any of the codes, you can immediately see all of the relevant extracts in the right-hand side, which again, it makes it really easy for dropping into a report. And coming back to this thing of the matrix coding query, we can break down any of these codes that we've created. Let's see that one, alleviate pain. So these are the three. So what we're doing here is we're taking the open-ended questions and see how do they break down against. Well, let's say. This. This may or may not work. Not sure all the right data is in there, but let's see. So this should, in theory, give us an age breakdown. You know, how does this coding break down by age? Yeah, okay, that works, which is nice. So this category is people in the age group under 65. So we can see that, you know, 16 of those people, we see that one of those was to do with alleviate pain, one for arthritis, one for fibromyalgia. And okay, I haven't set this up exactly, correctly, but I hope you can see that the principle that we could take any open-ended any coding from the open-ended questions and break it down by, you know, the age of the respondent or the gender of the respondent. At the moment, this table is set just for the, to show the frequency, how many codes, but it can show percentage as well. So, you know, I think that's a really useful feature because, you know, it's bringing back in a sort of quantitative aspect. Quantitative aspect to the qualitative data. So you've got a nice mix of both. You can create the themes and the codes freely, but then you can say, okay, how do they break down against the other variables in my data? And this is a bit that most people never do. You know, they code the open-ended responses, but you generally don't see it then broken down by, you know, age, gender, or anything else like that. So that's a lot of missed opportunity for getting insight into your data, I think. So I will pause there, and sorry, it doesn't leave a lot of time, but if there are any questions about your own work or about the presentation, please fire away.
If I may invite the students, I know a lot of students here collecting data, and you know, if you want to ask any questions related to your analysis, that's one. Second, I will share. I've got some messages from students right now by email asking me where to get NVIVO. So we have KBox students and staff from Middlesex. Please don't worry. I'll send an email later with details about how to get NVIVO. But yeah, I'll invite students, just like Mike said. Please, if you have any queries, any questions, please go ahead.
No.
Okay, guys. So if there's no questions, I mean, even if you don't have questions now, I'm pretty sure you can send me those questions, and later I can relay those questions to Mike. Mike, thank you very much. I
You're
think
welcome.
it's been a great session. I'm sorry, the academics had to leave, but
No worries.
I can see Virg still here, our colleague. So thank you very much for you know, this awesome workshop. I think we needed to start somewhere. Students needed to know what's there for them to do their analysis, their qualitative analysis. And now we've talked about as well open-ended question from our questionnaire. So I think it's been a very useful workshop. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We really appreciate your input in this. Thank you.
No, thanks so much. It was nice to get to talk to you. And I will just throw in quickly that it's about this time of year that the licenses change over. As you may If you download NVIVO now, you'll probably be getting a license that's going to run out in about 2 days.
So I'm
pretty
sure.
on that.
No, I realized that, so I was gonna email students and obviously warn them about this, and also ask them to check again next week for the new license. But
Okay, just in case you weren't. Yeah, great.
But
no, well,
thank you very
so
much. Say again, sorry.
No, say if anybody wants to, if you want to pass on any questions to me by email at a later time, I'm happy to take any queries that way. So, thanks very much, and hope you all get out there and explore NVIVO, and that you find it useful for your work.
Thank you very much. For me, it's been really useful, and it will be. I've tried to use NVIVO, learning by myself on YouTube, but I think we needed somebody to really explain and be with us while we learn. So I think this today was for me very useful, and for my students, I'm pretty sure.
Great. Really glad to hear that. And have a great day then. And I'll take any queries by email. And I shall
Sure. Thank you.
make the
Yeah.
recording available to you.
Thank you,
shortly.
Mike. And I'll email you, by tonight, I'll email you as well, just to thank you again and so on. Thank you very much.
Great. Thanks, everybody. Take care.
All right. Okay. Bye-bye. Thank you,
Bye.
students. And thank you, Mike. Bye-bye.
Yes.
Bye-bye.